Story 1. Tainted Love by Soft Cell. Soft Cell's version was later covered by Marilyn Manson. It Must Be Love by Madness. Story 2. Nothing Compares to You. Prince's original version is very good, but Sinead O'Connor took it to another level. Story 3. Although many people know that the Fugees' Killing Me Softly is a cover, most believe Roberta Flack's 1973 version was the original. The song was first released in 1972 by songwriter Lori Lieberman, who was denied writing credit and consequently missed out on millions in royalties. Story 4. 1985 by Bowling for Soup. It was originally by a band called SR71, who gave them the song. Story 5. I Will Always Love You. I didn't know Dolly originally sang it. Story 6. The song Girls Just Wanna Have Fun being a cover was new to me. I only learned this in the last 15 years. Story 7. Respect by Aretha Franklin is a cover of an Otis Redding song. Story 8. 15-year-old me in the late 1990s. Who is this George Michael fellow, and why is he doing a cover of Limp Bizkit's song Faith? Story 9. Love Hurts by Nazareth was originally an Everly Brothers song. Istanbul Not Constantinople by They Might Be Giants is often thought of as their song, but it dates from 1953 and was first recorded by the Four Lads. It was written for the 500th anniversary of Constantinople falling to the Ottomans. Story 10. Hurt, performed by Johnny Cash, is originally a 9 Inch Nails song, not the other way around. Boy, was my mind blown. Story 11. Annie Lennox. No More I Love Yous. I had the album back in the day and realized that all the other songs were covers. Then there was this one that seemed to come out of nowhere. I did not hear the original until a couple of months ago while playing a YouTube music trivia quiz. Story 12. Hard to Handle. Most people know the version by the Black Crowes from the 1990s. Imagine my surprise when I learned it was originally by Otis Redding. Story 13. The House of the Rising Sun by The Animals is a folk song. The first recording dates from 1934. Story 14. I Will Always Love You, sung by Whitney Houston, originally written and performed by Dolly Parton. Story 15. Tainted Love, performed by Soft Cell, originally by Gloria Jones. Third Uncle, performed by Bauhaus, originally by Brian Eno. Story 16. I Love Rock and Roll. I always thought it was a Joan Jett original. Story 17. It's My Life by Talk Talk. I had only ever heard the No Doubt version until I was about 20. Story 18. Every Time We Touch by Cascada. It is originally by Maggie Riley. Story 19. Tiffany's version of I Think We're Alone Now. The original was released in the 1960s, I believe. Story 20. Some of the ones I didn't know at the time. Blondie covered Hanging on the Telephone, The Nerves. The Tide is High, The Paragons. Led Zeppelin covered Dazed and Confused, Jake Holmes. The English Beat covered Tears of a Clown, Smokey Robinson. Can't Get Used to Losing You, Andy Williams. Story 21. Sloop John B. by the Beach Boys is a traditional Bahamian folk song. Story 22. All Along the Watchtower, performed by Jimi Hendrix. I was in my 20s before I knew the original was by Bob Dylan. Story 23. Betty Davis Eyes by Kim Carnes was originally recorded by Jackie DeShannon, who wrote it. DeShannon's version has a swing to it, almost like New Orleans jazz, and drum machines were not common on pop recordings then. This was 1974. Carnes's hit version from 1981 sounds like music from outer space in comparison. Just a few years in pop music can make a huge difference. Story 24. Mama Told Me Not to Come by Three Dog Night was written and originally sung by Randy Newman. Story 25. Hazy Shade of Winter by the Bangles, originally by Simon and Garfunkel. Story 26. I only knew George Harrison's 1987 version of I've Got My Mind Set on You until a few weeks ago when I heard the original 1962 Calypso-style recording by James Ray and the Hutch Davies Orchestra. I have long loved the King Harvest version of Dancing in the Moonlight. I only recently heard the original by Sherman Kelly. Story 27. Tiffany's. I Saw Him Standing There. The first time 6-year-old me heard the original, I saw her standing there by the Beatles. I was upset that boys had taken her song and made it so plain. Story 28. Blinded by the Light and For You are original Bruce Springsteen songs, but were covered by Manfred Mann's Earth Band. It's amazing that I remember that. Story 29. I just found out last month that the song It's My Life by No Doubt is actually a cover. Story 30. House of the Rising Sun by The Animals. A very superior cover, in my opinion. Story 31. There Is No Way Out of Here by David Gilmour. Written by Ken Baker and originally performed by the band Unicorn. David Gilmour's version is one of my favorite performances. Do yourself a favor and give it a listen. Story 32. Step On by the Happy Mondays was originally recorded by John Congos and released in 1971. Story 33. Gloria by Laura Branigan. Story 34. Girls Just Want to Have Fun. Cyndi Lauper is great, and it is a fun song. Learning that it was written as a rock song by a man named Robert Hazard from a male perspective was cool. I love that original version. Story 35. The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia by Reba McEntire was originally recorded by Vicki Lawrence 20 years earlier. Story 36. One I had always known that really annoyed me was She's the One by Robbie Williams. The story goes that Williams overheard Carl Wallinger singing it, got the session musicians to stay on and re-recorded his own version. Although Wallinger received royalties, he always felt that Williams had stolen his breakthrough hit. That feeling was compounded when Williams publicly said it was the best song he had ever written. Story 37. The City of New Orleans by Arlo Guthrie. I recognize the Goodman version as the original, but I will also ask for it to be turned off. It is a sad song, damn it. It should not be performed with a happy instrument. Story 38. I remember being surprised in the 1990s that My Maria by Brooks and Dunn was a cover. It is probably common knowledge now. Story 39. The version of the 1980s song Der Kommissar that most Americans know is by After the Fire, but it is a cover of a song by Falco. Dead Souls by 9 Inch Nails is a cover of a Joy Division song. Venus by Bananarama is a cover of a Shocking Blue song. Story 40. East Side Beat. Ride Like the Wind, 1991. Christopher Cross is the original writer. His version was released in 1979. There are also covers, for example by Saxon. Eruption One Way Ticket, 1978. Written by Jack Keller and Hank Hunter. Originally performed by American singer Neil Sedaka in 1959. I realize this may be obvious in the United States. I am not American. Story 41. Summer Breeze by Type O Negative. Laughing out loud. I did not know about the 1960s version. I do now. Story 42. I learned yesterday that Dear Prudence by Susie and the Banshees, probably one of their best-known songs, is actually a Beatles cover. Story 43. Take Me to the River. The Talking Heads version was originally by Al Green. Story 44. Red Red Wine, Unemployment Benefit Form 40. Life is a Highway Rascal Flatts. Knockin' on Heaven's Door Guns N' Roses. Story 45. Last Kiss. I did not realize it was not a Pearl Jam song until I was 19. Story 46. Motley Crue Smokin' in the Boys' Room. Original by Brownsville Station. Story 47. My Way by Frank Sinatra was a cover of Claude Francois' song, Comme de Habitude. Story 48. Wild in the Streets was not originally by the Circle Jerks. It was first recorded by Garland Jeffries. Story 49. I was happy that Nirvana performed The Man Who Sold the World because it was a David Bowie cover. Story 50. I Never Knew Proud Mary was originally sung by Creedence Clearwater Revival. Now it is Tina Turner's signature song. Story 51. Istanbul Not Constantinople by They Might Be Giants. Originally done by the Four Lads. Story 52. Black Betty by Ram Jam. Nothing Compares to You. I didn't know Prince recorded it first. Story 53. I grew up listening to most of the songs from Moulin Rouge when I was a child. Now I am stuck thinking the Moulin Rouge version of Roxanne will always be better than the original. Story 54. It might not be a song from my childhood but from my early 20s. The 2015 version by Disturbed of The Sound of Silence is a cover of the 1966 original by Simon and Garfunkel. Story 55. Walk Away Renee by the Four Tops. Their version is excellent, but I prefer the Left Banks. Story 56. Santana's version of Black Magic Woman is a cover of Fleetwood Mac's original written by Peter Green. Story 57. I just learned 2 months ago that Scarlet Begonias by Sublime is a cover. I am in my late 30s. My preferred music choices resemble those of a 60-year-old, so I am astounded that I did not know. To be fair, Grateful Dead, Fish, and others are not my cup of tea. Story 58. Tainted Love by Soft Cell. Originally recorded by Gloria Jones in 1964. Sometimes I Feel. Story 59. The Donna Summer version of MacArthur Park is excellent, but it was originally sung by Richard Harris. Story 60. Good Lovin' is originally by the Olympics. It was first covered by the Rascals and later covered by the Grateful Dead. Story 61. Wild Thing by Jimi Hendrix was originally recorded by the Troggs. Story 62. My husband and I argue about who sang Proud Mary. Creedence Clearwater Revival released it in 1969, but Ike and Tina Turner recorded it in 1970. Both versions are great, but they have totally different vibes. Story 63. I have learned a lot in this thread. Now I need to take a day off work so I can listen to all the original recordings that I did not know existed. Story 64. Typo Negative's Summer Breeze. I had no idea until I heard the original come on the radio. It broke my worldview. Also, I listened to Black Label Society's cover of Heart of Gold for a long time before I heard the Johnny Cash version. Imagine my surprise when they were both covers of Neil Young. Story 65. Istanbul, Not Constantinople by They Might Be Giants is a cover of a 1953 song by Jimmy Kennedy and Nat Simon. Story 66. Tennessee Whiskey by Chris Stapleton blends lyrics from David Allan Coe's song of the same name with instrumentals from I'd Rather Go Blind by Etta James. I always knew it was a cover, but I did not know the instrumental was an Etta James sample. Story 67. Me and Bobby McGee by Janis Joplin. The original song was recorded by Roger Miller 2 years earlier. I knew Summertime was a cover because I sang it in middle school chorus, but learning that Me and Bobby McGee was originally recorded by a man blew my mind. Story 68. You Really Got Me, performed by Van Halen, was originally written by the Kinks. Story 69. Hound Dog, written and performed by Big Mama Thornton, popularized by Elvis Presley. Story 70. The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia was originally sung by Vicki Lawrence and released in 1973. I grew up on Reba McEntire's 1991 version and always loved it. I did not hear the Lawrence version until about 2 years ago in a grocery store and thought it was a nice cover of Reba's song. I was flabbergasted when I looked it up. Story 71. I was once at a Conor Oberst concert and chatting with a girl next to me. We were talking about the Bright Eyes Christmas album and she said Blue Christmas is her favorite song Conor ever wrote. I guess she has never heard of Elvis. Story 72. Tiffany's I Think We're Alone Now. I saw a 75-year-old Lena Lovick perform it last year and thought she was doing it as an ironic piss take, until Google told me she had recorded it in 1978 and that was itself a cover of an original from 1967. Story 73. Red Red Wine by Unemployment Benefit Form 40. When I first heard the Elvis Presley version, I thought it was a spoof. Story 74. Soft Cell Tainted Love. The original was recorded by Motown artist Gloria Jones in 1965. Story 75. The song Respect by Aretha Franklin was originally written and recorded by Otis Redding. Story 76. Hate to say it, but Knockin' on Heaven's Door. I grew up thinking it was Aerosmith. I never knew it was Dylan. Story 77. Sailing, performed by Rod Stewart, was written by the Sutherland Brothers and first released in 1972. Story 78. Istanbul, Not Constantinople, by They Might Be Giants is a cover of a 1953 song by Jimmy Kennedy and Nat Simon. Story 79. Gangsta's Paradise by Coolio samples Pastime Paradise by Stevie Wonder. Story 80. I am old, so I already knew almost all of the songs on the list. The one that surprised me was that I Want Candy was recorded in 1965 by the Strangeloves. I learned that about 10 years ago, and every time I hear it I laugh at myself for not knowing. Story 81. Untouchable by Taylor Swift. I just learned this year that it was a cover. Story 82. Come On Feel the Noise was recorded by Slade before it was covered by Quiet Riot. Smokin' in the Boys' Room was recorded by Brownsville Station before it was covered by Motley Crue. Story 83. Lotta Love by Nicolette Larson. I was gobsmacked when I found out Neil Young wrote it. Story 84. I Feel For You, a huge hit for Chaka Khan in 1984, was written and first recorded on the self-titled album Prince in 1979. Story 85. Nadia's Theme, originally titled Cotton's Dream, is a piece of music composed by Barry Dvorak and Perry Bakken Jr. in 1971. It was part of the soundtrack of the 1971 Stanley Kramer film Bless the Beasts and Children and became better known as the theme music for the television soap opera The Young and the Restless when the series premiered in 1973. Later, Cotton's Dream was given the informal name Nadia's Theme after it became associated with Olympic gymnast Nadia Comaneci during and after the 1976 Summer Olympics. Story 86. I didn't realize until I was an adult that Billy Joel wrote and recorded Just the Way You Are before Barry White. Story 87. Leaving on a Jet Plane was made popular by Peter, Paul, and Mary. It was written by John Denver. Story 88. I first heard and quickly came to love Johnny Cash's Hurt long before learning it was a Nine Inch Nails cover. My mind was blown. Story 89. Blowin' in the Wind by Peter, Paul, and Mary. It was a Bob Dylan song. Story 90. I always thought Lake of Fire was my favorite Nirvana song until I learned it was a Meat Puppet song. Story 91. Not Me. In high school, I got into an argument with my girlfriend over a song she would not believe was a cover. She insisted that Sympathy for the Devil was by Jane's Addiction. I had to dig through my dad's record collection to find a Rolling Stones album with the original on it. Even after I played it, she suggested that maybe the Rolling Stones had covered Jane's Addiction. Story 92. I did not realize Newfound Glory's King of Wishful Thinking was a cover until a handful of years ago, even though it is on a cover album. Laughing my ass off. Story 93. Red, Ordinary World. I had a definite niche when it came to music, so I was shocked when I heard another band play this on the radio, only to learn they were the original. I prefer the cover. Story 94. I thought Suspicious Minds was a fine young Cannibals song, not an Elvis Presley hit from the 1960s. There was even an earlier version by the original songwriter. Story 95. Louie Louie was originally written by Richard Berry in the 1950s. Story 96. Tennessee Whiskey, performed by Chris Stapleton, was originally sung by David Allan Coe. Maybe I'm just a young one, though. Story 97. Torn by Natalie Imbruglia. Also big in Japan by Guano Apes. I only learned it was a cover about a year after I first heard the song. Story 98. The Ghost in You cover by the Counting Crows. Original by the Psychedelic Furs. Story 99. Elton John's Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. It did not take long for me to realize it was a song by the Beatles. Story 100. Istanbul Not Constantinople by They Might Be Giants was originally a song from the 1950s. Story 101. Changes by Charles Bradley. I loved his cover so much that I went to show my dad and he said it was an odd Black Sabbath song to cover. Story 102. I taught some friends this year that Year 3000 was not originally by the Jonas Brothers, and that the chorus lyrics were changed to be more family-friendly. Laughing out loud. Story 103. I was more familiar with Dance House Trance's version of Listen to Your Heart when I was younger, so I was surprised to learn it was a cover of the Roxette song. Story 104. Valerie by Amy Winehouse. Send Me an Angel by Highly Suspect. Story 105. In 1982, Laura Branigan's Gloria was released. It had first been recorded in Italian by Umberto Tozzi in 1979. I found that out 3 years ago. Story 106. Somebody responded to a similar question a while back, saying they did not realize that Comfortably Numb by the Scissor Sisters was a cover. Story 107. Feeling Good is not a Nina Simone original. It was written for the musical The Roar of the Grease Paint, The Smell of the Crowd, and was first performed on stage by Cy Grant. Story 108. I scrolled and was surprised I did not see With a Little Help from My Friends. Apart from being one of those absolutely iconic songs from Woodstock before my time and essentially defining Joe Cocker from then on, it was the intro tune to the Wonder Years. I was born in the early 1980s, and although I was well aware of the Beatles and enjoyed their music, it took me some time to realize that Joe Cocker's signature song was not originally his. Story 109. To Make You Feel My Love is written by Bob Dylan, not Adele. Story 110. Jennifer Lopez's Waiting for Tonight was originally sung by Third Party. Story 111. Pictures of Matchstick Men by Camper Van Beethoven. I really loved the song and found out much later it was a cover of a 1960s British rock band called Status Quo. There is also a cover by Typo Negative and one by Ozzy Osbourne. Story 112. Although performed by George Michael and Mary J. Blige, the song was originally sung and likely written by Stevie Wonder. Story 113. Vanessa Carlton's cover of Paint It Black. I had that whole album, Be Not Nobody, on my computer when I was a kid and listened to it all the time. The first time I heard the original by the Rolling Stones on the radio, I said, "Oh, it's Vanessa Carlton's song." My dad replied, "Whose song?" Story 114. Everybody by Mac Miller is a cover of Everybody's Gotta Live by Arthur Lee. I had no clue until just last year. Story 115. Midnight Train to Georgia by Gladys Knight. Originally written and recorded as Midnight Plane to Houston by Jim Weatherly. Story 116. Owen Paul's My Favorite Waste of Time. I was about 40 when I discovered Marshall Crenshaw after moving to North America. I had gone about 30 years without knowing his music. Story 117. Johnny B. Good by Judas Priest was originally performed by Chuck Berry. Story 118. Garth Brooks' Shameless was written and first performed by Billy Joel. I also did not know that I Feel Love, which I heard from Venus Hum and the Blue Man Group, was first performed by Donna Summer in the 1970s. Story 119. Cruel Summer by Ace of Base, originally by Bananarama. Nothing Compares to You by Sinead O'Connor, originally by Prince. Story 120. I never knew anyone performed Daydream Believer before and Murray until I heard the Monkees version. Story 121. Shameless was written and released by Billy Joel a couple of years before Garth Brooks recorded it. Story 122. I did not know NOFX's All of Me was a cover until I heard the original as an adult. Story 123. Hallowed Be Thy Name by Cradle of Filth. I had no idea Iron Maiden recorded it first. It was a shock when it came on Planet Rock. It is a favorite of mine. I still prefer the remake, but I will happily listen to the original as well. Story 124. Blinded by the Light. Manfred Mann recorded the well-known version, and Bruce Springsteen was the original writer. 1985. Bowling for Soup covered a song originally by SR-71. My Maria. Brooks and Dunn covered a song by B.W. Stevenson, who also recorded the original version of Shambhala that most people know by Three Dog Night. Story 125. Black Magic Woman, popularized by Santana, was originally recorded by Fleetwood Mac. Story 126. Blinded by the Light was a cover of Bruce Springsteen's original. Story 127. Landslide by the Chicks. I'll never forget how a friend's dad shamed me when the original Landslide came on the radio. He asked if I knew who sang it and laughed when I said the Chicks. Story 128. I Think We're Alone Now by Tiffany was everywhere for a hot minute, and I had no idea until I was in my 30s that it was a cover. Story 129. I probably thought Landslide was a song by the Chicks until I was in middle school. Story 130. All Along the Watchtower. When I found out, I wondered what other Bob Dylan songs I might like if performed by someone else. Story 131. Tesla's Little Susie is a cover of the song Little Susie's on the Up by the British new wave band PhD. Story 132. Got My Mindset on You was not originally recorded by George Harrison. I Think We're Alone Now was not originally recorded by Tiffany. I like both songs but prefer the originals. Story 133. I feel people still do not realize that Wagon Wheel was written by Bob Dylan and mistakenly think Darius Rucker covered Old Crow Medicine Show. Story 134. Land of Confusion, performed by Disturbed. I lost my mind when I heard Phil Collins sing it. Story 135. Alone by Heart is a cover of a song by I-10. The Only Way Is Up by Yaz was originally recorded by Otis Clay. Story 136. My parents are big Chris de Burgh fans. He released 2 albums of cover songs, and I often did not know which song came from which album. I am 32 and still occasionally realize a song was a cover. The most notable was American Pie, which I figured out a while ago. Story 137. Blinded by the Light. I had no idea it was a Springsteen original. Story 138. Since House of the Rising Sun has been mentioned, The Pusher by Steppenwolf was originally composed and performed by Hoyt Axton. Story 139. Blinded by the Light, performed by Manfred Mann. Written by Bruce Springsteen. Story 140. If You Could Read My Mind by Stars on 54. When I was working a show with Gordon Lightfoot and he played that song, I thought, hey, isn't that a dance song? Why is he covering it? So, Story 141. Always on My Mind by Pet Shop Boys, the song that made me fall in love with music. Story 142. Rockin' All Over the World Status Quo. This is a cover. John Fogerty of Creedence Clearwater Revival wrote and recorded it on his first solo album 2 years before Status Quo covered it. Story 143. This was a few years ago when I discovered Sturgill Simpson and did not realize his song The Promise was a cover of Flock of Seagulls until it played one day on the easy listening station at work. And I thought, wait a minute. Story 144. One by Three Dog Night. The original is by Harry Nilsson, who coincidentally became famous for his version of Without You, which was originally recorded by Badfinger. Story 145. Better Be Good to Me by Tina Turner. The original is by a group called Spider. Tina Turner's version is much better. She reproduces the original vocal very faithfully and elevates it dramatically. Her version also has a great bass line, while the original had the bass following the guitar. Story 146. I was shocked to learn that the Beatles did not write Roll over Beethoven. Story 147. Marilyn Manson's Personal Jesus. I had no idea it was a cover until many years later. Story 148. My parents could always identify cover songs immediately upon hearing them, so I was never surprised that there is nothing new under the sun. We had rich discussions about how some songs are derivatives of 300-year-old folk songs, reusing certain verses and skipping others. They also had an extensive reference library. Story 149. A few of the Beatles' early hits include, for example, Bad Boy, Mr. Postman, Roll Over Beethoven, and so on. Story 150. Dancing in the Street. My dad is a guitarist and I grew up on Van Halen. I had no idea they weren't the original performers. Martha and the Vandellas recorded it in 1965. Story 151. I have a whole 111-song playlist. Embarrassingly, it includes Because the Night by Patti Smith. I am a huge Bruce Springsteen fan as well, so how did I not realize the song was his? Story 152. Check out secondhandsongs.com and you will find many more. Story 153. Drift Away by Dobie Gray. I knew the Uncle Kracker version was a cover. I always thought Dobie Gray was the original who made it famous, but his version was also a cover. Story 154. The Nirvana song Love Buzz was originally performed by Shocking Blue. Story 155. I honestly thought Boys and the Hood was a Dynamite Hack song and that it was just meant to be funny. Then I finally heard the original Eazy-E and Niggas with Attitudes version with my wife, who gave me the biggest what the fuck look when I told her. Story 156. Whitney Houston. I Will Always Love You. Originally by Dolly Parton. Story 157. This version of Just a Dream by Christina Grimmie and Sam Sui. Story 158. The Nurse Who Loved Me by A Perfect Circle turned out to be a cover of a song by Failure. Story 159. Life is a Highway. I was 10 when the movie Cars came out, and I assumed that Rascal Flatts had written the song specifically for the movie. Then I heard the original Tom Cochrane version on the radio and was flabbergasted. Story 160. Brian Ferry and Roxy Music cover Bob Dylan's A Hard Rain Is Going to Fall. Story 161. I grew up listening to both Smashing Pumpkins and Fleetwood Mac singing Landslide. Took me years to connect them. I also did not know Limp Bizkit's Faith was a cover. I had never heard the original. Story 162. I Fought the Law was covered by The Clash in 1979. The Bobby Fuller Four popularized the song in 1966 with a cover of the original released by the Crickets in 1960. Story 163. Torn, Natalie Imbruglia, originally by Edna Swab. Venus, Bananarama, originally by Shocking Blue. Dead Souls, 9 Inch Nails, originally by Joy Division. The Badge, Pantera, originally by Poison Idea. Renegades, Rage Against the Machine, originally by Africa Bambaataa. How I Could Just Kill a Man, Rage Against the Machine, originally by Cypress Hill. Got the Time, Anthrax, originally by Joe Jackson. Story 164. Nobody But Me by the Human Banes, originally written by O'Kelly Isley. Story 165. Heroes by the Wallflowers. I first heard it at about age 12 in the film The Replacements. I later found out it was a hit by David Bowie. Story 166. Sweet Caroline. It'll always be Elvis's song in my world. Story 167. KWS covered Please Don't Go, originally performed by KC and the Sunshine Band. Both versions are excellent. I love them. Story 168. I Held Her in My Arms. I knew the Alkaline Trio version, and even though I am a Violent Femmes fan, I missed that they recorded it in 1986. Story 169. Growing up, I thought Hard to Handle was by the Black Crowes. Even when my dad tried to correct me, I did not believe him. Story 170. Until about 10 years ago, I did not know that Black Magic Woman was originally a Fleetwood Mac song, not a Santana song. Story 171. I Will Always Love You. Whitney took it to the next level, and I only recently found out it was not her original song. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.